Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with some more Cathay news. Just a few moments ago, Creative Assembly have dropped a blog detailing changes to history and lore regarding Cathay. As always, I was granted early access to this, so we're going to be able to go over it together and see any changes that may affect the future of Warhammer Fantasy, because there's a lot of interesting stuff here. And there might be some hints towards possible future DLC, but let's not waste any more time and jump right in. So let's start off with the actual first lore paragraph. Grand Cathay is a massive and incredibly powerful empire situated in the east of the Warhammer world, beyond the Darklands, across the Mountains of Morn and past the Great Moor. The gaping wound in the land caused by Grand Cathay's astromancers millennia ago. It covers a landmass larger than the Empire, Bretonnia, and many other nations combined. Vast cities pockmarked the landscape, with huge populations watched over by the ruling dragons. The Celestial Dragon Emperor, his consort the Moon Empress, and their children. Okay, so we can already talk about a few things here. First up, they're really hinting towards Ogre Kingdoms being the pre-order DLC. They should just outright say it at this point. Second off, we finally have confirmation that Grand Cathay was behind the Great Moor. The fact is that it was always heavily hinted, but the speculation always put it towards different other locations. So I wonder what this means for Ogre lore in the future if their god was created by the Cathayans. It's something a little strange and we're going to have to dig into this deeper in a theory video. Next up, we find out that Grand Cathay is a massive landmass, which we already knew from lore, so okay, nothing really changes there, and that everything is ruled by the Dragon Emperor, his consort, and their children. We knew about the Dragon Emperor, I believe, knew about the Moon Empress, but we didn't know anything about kids. Obviously the kids are new themselves as their new legendary lords. I hope it won't be too long until the lore of the Dragon Emperor, his consort, and their children gets fleshed out a little bit more, because we need a bit more context. We don't know much as it is. Let's move on to the next paragraph. To the north lies the Great Bastion, constructed thousands of years past by the Dragon Emperor himself and imbued with much of his magic. A humongous wall that has stood for eons against the ever-present threat of chaos. In times gone by and for many millennia, chaos has been the most serious threat to Grand Cathay. Had the Emperor and Moon Empress wished it, sheer force of numbers and powerful magics and artillery could have dominated much of the land to the west. But they have been content to rule and defend their already formidable nation. Okay, there's a few things to talk about here. We know about the Great Bastion. It's pretty much just, the Great Wall of China, because obviously Cathay is based on China. The wall itself acts as a defensive line against chaos, because obviously in the northern reaches of the world it's mostly chaos, so this acts as their defensive line. Now it stands in lore having been constructed for many millennia, which now makes sense of course because the Dragon Emperor is quite ancient. More on that in a little bit. Now, what does strike me as a bit strange is the whole had they wished it they could dominate the lands of the west. Well, not only would they have to deal with the Chaos Dwarfs, which have pretty powerful artillery themselves, they'd also have to deal with the Ogre Kingdoms, they'd have to deal with Orcs, Goblins, Skaven. There are a lot of different varying powers to the west, so I wouldn't say that they would be able to. Obviously, we've not seen Cathay's power levels so far, but we have to wait and see how that goes, but it's just putting them to the strongest point, and yes, they were one of the strongest human nations in Warhammer Fantasy, but I wouldn't put them as the point of them dominating. Just making myself very clear here, I'm not complaining, I'm just trying to make sense of the lore changes, as I've only had access to this for a few hours. Next paragraph. Harmony is the driving force behind Cathayan society. The teachings of the Dragon Emperor are such that everyone must work in concert with themselves and the land for the betterment of all and to find their natural place. This drives everything from their magic laws of yin and yang to how the dragons govern their people. Far from tyrants or aloof aristocrats, the dragons act as teachers and wardens for the populace. They see little point in creating an imbalance between mortals and themselves when the ever-present threat of chaos will happily destroy them all. Okay, so we've got the harmony focus here. We knew this was going to happen as it's actually part of old Warhammer Fantasy lore. It's very obvious from this article that they're not doing a complete rewrite, but rather expanding upon stuff that's already there, which works out really well, as of course, yeah, some stuff does need to be rewritten, but the stuff that was established like 20, 30 years ago, that stuff could stay and it keeps the old Warhammer Fantasy fans happy. Okay, next paragraph. Similarly, the dragons are not treated as gods, nor do they demand worship. They are immensely powerful beings, rulers by magical and physical right, rather than mysterious divinity. The iconography of the dragons is commonplace and ever-present throughout society, but because they are very real, very present, and very powerful rulers, they are treated by the people with the reverence such beings deserve, and speaking ill of them, especially if you are not native to Grand Cathay, is a quick way to get yourself killed. So they don't demand worship like if they were gods, but they are worshipped like they were gods. And speaking ill of them, I don't know, does that not sound a bit totalitarian? I mean, it kinda does. That being said, we know in lore they've always worshipped the multiple dragon emperors. This was obviously in previous lore, where now we only seem to have one. But yeah, okay, that makes sense. If a massive mystical dragon shows up, builds a great wall, and starts uniting tribes and so on, I guess people are gonna start worshipping it. It's a normal, common thing, I guess. Alright, next paragraph. The dragons often move among the people in human form. While still evidently far beyond the commoner, they only transform to their draconic selves when there is need, embracing their heritage to lay waste to a battlefield and fly above their forces. In war, the harmony of the Cathayan way of life is ever present, their forces acting in concert to lay waste to the enemies with devastating precision and calm. Alright, so we know about the transformation thing. This is actually very early lore where we knew the Dragon Emperor was some sort of dragon, but nobody ever saw them transform. It was just like a title, but it was kind of like confirmed without being confirmed. They're further pushing again the whole harmony, yin and yang type of situation, which, yeah, again, makes sense. I like the idea of this. It's going to be really weird to play an army where balance is needed, especially for Total War, but I guess we'll have to see where it goes. In Total War Warhammer 3, our focus is on two main areas, Northern Cathay with the Storm Dragon Meow Jing and the Great Bastion, and Western Cathay with the Iron Dragon Xiao Ming and the Ivory Road. The land of the Storm Dragon includes the fortress city of Nangao, never conquered or sacked despite the many wars that have met its borders. Naturally, the Great Bastion dominates much of the landscape, with its massive gates and huge patrols of troops fending off attacks from chaos. The eastern steppes make up the lands beyond, thoroughly infested with chaos of every stripe. Okay, so let's start talking about this then. So the main focus is two areas of Cathay, Northern and Western. Does this mean that we won't see all of Cathay in the main map? It needs to be a bit clear here, as saying that this is the focus on two main areas is just a bit strange. Now, we already know about the two locations that we'll be fighting, Northern and Western, because we've already had this information before, and that's pretty much it. The Eastern Steppes make up the lands beyond, so we know we're going further north. The Eastern Steppes are actually in the northern parts of Cathay. Now, the fact that this did get the mention, hopefully this means that we might see something interesting up north, as obviously there's a lot of different chaos stuff up there with the whole Kurgans and all that type of stuff, but let's talk about that another day. Meow Jing is arguably the most powerful dragon alive, save her mother and father. Immense power and immense responsibility land on her shoulders, and she can seem cold and aloof in comparison to her siblings. The defense of the realm, the future of Grand Cathay, and much more is quite the burden to bear. Well, this kind of makes sense as obviously she's fighting in the northern borders, that's where the Grand Bastion is, so there's a lot of enemies constantly attacking. It's probably why she looks like such an emo in most cases, and again we get a lot of reference to her siblings plural. These are definitely going to be legendary lords in the future. I can almost feel it because it just makes sense as they're mentioning siblings a lot. Back to Meow Jing, I mean, she's a cool character. I quite liked her appearance in the trailer. I'm more interested in the Iron Dragon though, so let's start talking about him. Meanwhile, the Iron Dragon must make do with a less defended, if less chaotic, and chaotic area of the world. The western provinces contain beasts and men of all sorts coming from further west, as well as the regular incursions of Skaven and ogres from the Warpstone Desert and the Mountains of Morn. The creation of the Great Maw still hangs heavy on this area, even as an uneasy peace maintains. Okay, so he's defending from pretty much anyone that's coming from the west to the east, which of course makes sense, that is a area of quite importance. And there seems to be a peace with the Ogre Kingdoms at the moment. That's actually really interesting. We're gonna have to wait and see how that works, but there's still incursions from them, so it's likely that his campaign could focus around ogres if ogres are the pre-order incentive. Like, that might actually be quite interesting. Xiao Ming is a natural-born warrior. Though less innately skilled than his sister to the north, he is a talented alchemist and shows great preference for the art among his armies, much to the chagrin of those that find the insidious magics warring for the Empire. His lifelong station so close to the Great Maw and all that warpstone mean many fear his mind is permanently damaged from the exposure, and any eccentricities or erratic behavior he displays is very worrying to his siblings. Okay, so we got a lot to discuss here. First off, he seems to be interested in the alchemy form of magics for Grand Cathay, and alchemy seems to be worrying for the Empire? That's very interesting. It could be that alchemy is fairly foreign or something like that, kind of displaying that it's a foreign entity and it could disrupt the natural order of things. I don't know, we're going to have to wait and see for that, but it's really curious because we know about alchemy before and it was very popular in Cathay, but now it seems to be worrying. I'm not too sure. Next thing, he's constantly fighting against Skaven ogres, and he's been close to the Great Maw and so much Warpstone that his mind might be a bit fractured. This is really curious. Obviously, this is kind of like the whole situation with many dragons in different pop culture references and so on. Say, for example, Deathwing in World of Warcraft, or even Alduin in Skyrim. They are susceptible to corruption, and it's great to see the fact that there is a possibility that some corruption is hitting Xiao Ming. We don't know exactly what the Great Maw is capable of at this point, because obviously it looks like they're trying to rewrite that. But when it comes to Warpstone, I mean, yeah, like, it's going to corrupt you. If it could corrupt stuff like Nagash, any vampires, pretty much anyone who gets close to it, like, yeah, it's going to do some damage, and this is going to be quite interesting. I can't wait to see how they go further with this. I'm not sure, but it really looks like they're trying to push a heavy narrative feel to Warhammer 3, which, yeah, I mean, I'm all for. The only thing is, it's kind of weird that they're doing all this for Cathay, and we know Kislev has had a lot of changes too, but we haven't seen any lore blogs of this degree. Of course, stability and prosperity have not reigned forever, and are unlikely to continue without a fight. The history of Grand Cathay is longer than even chaos, originating more than 5,000 years previous, when the Celestial Dragon Emperor ruled the land before the coming of the Old Ones. He learned how to take the form of a human to gather the tribes, and when chaos began to sweep the world, he defended his burgeoning empire, eventually constructing the Great Bastion to keep the hordes at bay. Okay, there's a few things to talk about here. So obviously we know that there has not been multiple Dragon Emperors now, but rather there is just one ancient one, and he is really ancient. He's been here since before the Old Ones, meaning that he is a primordial entity from the Warhammer Fantasy world. Very few creatures exist in that light anymore. He is a dragon, but possibly much more. It very much depends on how this works with the different types of dragon breeds now, because obviously the Eastern dragons are very different to that of what we're normally used to. The fact that he is older than the coming of the Old Ones, I don't know how this could work too well. It does bring a few lore inconsistencies, because obviously we know that the world was very primordial in nature. The beasts that were around were constantly killing each other and fighting for supremacy and so on. where order was actually brought in by the actual Old Ones themselves. It does lead to a lot of questions which will not have answers until we start getting some more stuff fleshing out the eventual coming of the Old Ones and so on. It's just very, very strange. Also, taking into account that humans really did not exist before the Old Ones. There were some proto-style humans and so on if we go by the whole Drakenfell storyline, but that has since been long retconned. It has been attacked on innumerable occasions, damaged, and even sometimes breached, but still, the Great Bastion stands as powerful a vanguard against chaos as ever, constantly maintained and garrisoned by massive armies. Only Tzeentch, known to Grand Cathay as Qian-Chi, has managed to significantly infiltrate the Empire, his cults being a common cause of disruption and rebellion within. Okay, so this is actually really, really good. The fact this is very old lore and it's still being kept as canon, I'm actually really, really happy about this because I was worried that they were going to make Cathay this Mary Sue faction, but yeah, they are susceptible to chaos corruption. It does happen fairly often. There's loads of chaos cults, specifically Tzeentchian. This is really, really good. I am very pleased with this. Trade is the main reasons the Western factions know of Grand Cathay's existence and its primary interaction with them. For outsiders, it's a realm of infinite riches and pleasures unknown, seemingly immune from the endless terrors that prowl the outside world. While this is far from the truth, the absolute economic power of the Ivory Road cannot be disputed, and those that make their living along it are evidence of that. For Grand Cathay, there's plenty to gain from an outside world with technology, trinkets, and beasts that are all foreign to them. Okay, so trade is very important. I wonder if we're going to see that as a form of mechanic. We've already expected this. A lot of people see Grand Cathay as a very powerful nation, but yeah, they have loads of issues from within, which is cool. This is very important as it keeps it grounded in the Warhammer setting. This is very important. It needs to stay as Warhammer. New factions can be introduced, no problem, but it needs to be Warhammer. The most tumultuous time in Grand Cathay's history came when a combination of invasions of Chaos from the north and the Monkey King from the south, alongside a 4-century disappearance of the Dragon Emperor and the Moon Empress, nearly led the Empire to ruin. Then, more than any other time, the natural competition between the Emperor's children reached its peak, and Grand Cathay was essentially divided into warring states. This allowed the Monkey King to take power and claim dominion over the Empire, an act heinous enough to galvanize the warring siblings into once again putting aside their differences to fight for their father's throne. At the key moment, the Emperor and Empress returned and helped to defeat the Monkey King, who fled south. Little is known of him or his fate. Okay, so the Monkey King still works here, and the Emperor was indeed disposed of for a while, but, well, he wasn't actually disposed, he just went missing, maybe on holiday. Ibiza sounds nice. The most important thing is we know that the Monkey King is in fact in canon still. He wasn't removed or anything, and he did in fact lead Cathay for a small amount of time. He's fled south, however, and I doubt that he's hiding within the lands of Grand Cathay. Maybe he could be in Koresh, that is south of Grand Cathay of course, and acts as a very good vantage point for them to attack. Perhaps teaming up with the Snake Men in an effort to try and take over? Who knows, we're going to have to wait and see, though the fact that they've acknowledged his existence means that he's a very possible DLC character in the future, and I really do hope so, as many of us have been hoping for the Monkey King, and we were expecting him to be a character at least at the announcement or a DLC in the future. Perhaps yet, darker days may be on the horizon. Events the world over are conspiring to require the attention of even these isolationists. Chaos amasses beyond the Great Bastion like never before. Rebellion and squabbles between local factions are reaching new heights within the Empire. Whatever machinations the Celestial Dragon Emperor has been planning continue to come to fruition. But to what end? Only he knows. What are you going to do about it? Okay, so we know that the whole chaos amassing stuff like that, that's the end times, it's just how it is. We are in the 8th edition timeline, so this means that chaos amassing with Archaon as the head means end times, so we're likely going to see a little bit of that storyline creep in, because it does make sense. Who knows what the Dragon Emperor is doing, however, as it's still very unclear. I mean, this lore is nice that we have some brief little bits here and there, but even then, we're in this point where nothing is really too clear. We're going to need novels coming out, or at least a few audiobooks or ebooks, because, well, we know nothing. We literally know nothing. Like, I'm comparing this to lore that we already know of through, say, the RPG series or even former editions, and it's still similar, but very different. This is the issue when something gets a complete rewrite. You are stuck as a fan trying to make sense of the situation, and I'm having that trouble. I am honestly having that trouble. I'm not complaining, however, as, yeah, new lore is always cool, and we have new information. Hopefully more starts coming out in the coming weeks too, to just kind of flesh out Cathay a little bit more. But what do you guys think about the lore changes and the fact that they have tried to keep some stuff in the whole previous canon as new canon, just expanding upon it? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel's been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.